update on repairs.
80% of homes have water. Nearly half the cell phone infrastructure is up and running, but crews have restored electricity to barely 40% of the island.
For more on recovery efforts in Puerto Rico, we want to bring in Tom Lewis.
He's president of the U.S. division of Berger. The federal government is contracting some repair work to the company, and he joins us now by way of Skype. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So we've heard it many times that Puerto Rico's infrastructure was in bad shape before Maria even arrived. Why was that the case?
Well, you had a situation of deferred maintenance. For example, because of the financial problems, they weren't able to keep the trees trimmed back away from the power lines the way you would ordinarily want to do so that you wouldn't be susceptible to wind during storm events.
You know, at this point, since Puerto Rico's infrastructure essentially has to be built up again from the ground up, does this mean maybe that island will end up with one of the best electrical grids in the country?
Well, certainly if you do it right, that should be the case. It's going to take a lot of integration between the federal government, that funding, which has limits, and then the private sector also playing a big role. And if you do that in an integrated fashion, you actually can end up with a much better system when you're done.
Now talk about the roles of renewable and sustainable technologies there in the rebuilding process.
Yeah, renewables like solar and wind can play a critical role, especially if you pair them up with battery storage or technologies like microgrids, such that you could connect in the regular power grid as well as the backup generators in a way that you will never have to worry about going out of power during a storm event. And also, you could use it day in, day out, such that you could even lower your utility bills while also being more green at the same time.
All right, that's definitely interesting. But let's talk about what can be very often a very complicated public-private partnership. Now, the federal government is getting a lot of help from the private corporations, such as yours. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so the federal government has funding which essentially builds back what was there before, so it has limits. In order to really build it back better, you have to engage financing and other funding from entities like banks, private infrastructure funds, charitable organizations, and even insurance companies who can participate in the financing of the rebuilding program.
All right, well, Tom Lewis, they're president of U.S. operations for Berger, private contractor for the federal government that is working there in Puerto Rico.
Tom, thank you so much for taking time with us. We appreciate it.